moon.
Hello there, I'm Tom from That's No Moon, and today I'm going to talk to you about how I like to build a list for rebels in Legion. I'm going to be using my list builder of choice Legion HQ by the 5th Trooper. I'm personally a fan of this list builder because it's really simple and they do a great job of keeping everything updated. First thing you want to do is make sure that you're logged in so that you can save all your lists. The way that I like to start list building is to pick a focus piece. I've recently rewatched Mando and I want to get him on the table, so let's go ahead and throw him in the list. You can't have a focus piece with no upgrades, so I'm going to start kitting out Din how I like to play him. Starting with the training, I'm going to add up close and personal and situational awareness. This is a real strong pairing with Din. With his pistol being range 1 to 2, up close and personal will trigger on all of his attacks, unless you're at range 3 and you use your independent aim for long shot. The way that I like to play will get him in the mix, so this is a great combo in my opinion. You could also make an argument for Hunter and Tenacity, as Mando likes to be in melee, giving him an extra red die on his melee attacks or an aim if he's attacking a wounded mini is a great choice, but this time we'll stick with it this way. Next I'm going to skip the comms upgrade for now and move on to gear. The jetpack in my opinion is an auto include. Jump 2, speed 3 is a huge addition to Din's kit. And then we're going to add Din's flame projector. Like I've been saying, we're going to get Din in the mix, and I think we'll be able to fire this off, and then it will trigger up close and personal. The last upgrade we're going to add to Din is his rifle or his spear. Both have great merit. The spear gives you more of a melee focused Mando, and this is best paired with Hunter and Tenacity in my opinion. So we're going to go for the other one for this build, and I'm going to take the Ambam rifle. This gun is pretty great. You get an unlimited range sniper that breaks the rules of the game. You can shoot into melee and your opponent doesn't roll defense dice. If you get into melee, you give out immobilize tokens, so this is a great force user counter, as you can bring every force user to speed 0 in one hit. The only get around is by spending the force power burst of speed to be a speed 1, so this is a great way to play Din. Din also has access to Grogu. Grogu gives you extra health and the latent power to either buff your army or nerf the enemy. The downside is that Grogu has the hunted keyword. So if you kill Mando, Grogu is dropped as a victory point on the table, and your opponent can pick it up, and at the end of the game, they can gain a victory point. So I'm going to leave Grogu out of this list, as I want to have the option to play Mando aggressively. Now that we have the focus piece for our list, let's work on supporting Din with the rest of the army. At the moment, the meta is a lot of red safe gunline, so let's make something I think can hold up to that meta. This won't be the most cutting edge meta list, but let's see if we can make something that'd be happy to play for a one-day tournament. The next thing I like to do in a list is adding the mandatory fields. So we need a commander and 3 core. Let's start by looking at the core options for rebels. You have standard rebel troopers, fleet troopers, rebel vets, and when you take them, that unlocks access to the Mark II medium blaster. There's a lot of ways to build your core. I've been a fan of naked core to fill out the core requirements and then throw something more interesting in the list, like special forces or supports, or more heroes. But having recently played a good amount of echo based defenders, and there still being some armour kicking around in the meta, I'm going to add some rebel vets with the CMO heavy weapon and some Mark IIs. So let's just go ahead and add 3 of each of those to the list. This gives us a strong range 4 gun line, with crit generation from the CMOs on their range 4 crit 2 gun, and it gives you more with the medium blaster as well. I want to play this as a gun line, so I'm going to add recon intel to the vets to make sure that I can get the best vantage point I can turn 0. And this will also give me a great spot to deploy my Mark IIs from, as they deploy a 1 speed move from the vets with the detachment rule. Next I'm going to add some comms text and HQ uplinks to each of these. Din being the focus means that I'm not likely to get many orders out, as his command cards are fairly greedy and only order himself. So having the uplinks means that once I'm in position I can pop the uplink and I get a dodge with defend and I coordinate to my Mark IIs, and all of my core then have orders each turn, cleaning up my bag for the rest of the list. I can use my actions to shoot and recover each turn, giving me a strong gun line with a fire support option in the Mark II having a face-up order. From here, let's add a commander. We got a bunch of options. Rebels is a bit of a hero-focused faction. Leia would be a great option, she can buff the rest of the list. You could add Jyn as an objective grabber, while Mando does his thing, and the gun line can still function without her, but I've not used him for a while, so I'm going to add Lando to the list. Lando brings contingencies, so I can bring 3 additional command cards, which is super helpful when some of your cards like Whistling Birds are pretty situational. So we'll add him to the list. With Sharpshooter 2, he can deny cover. A red and a black, Pierce 1, Surge to crit. He's pretty good against red saves and armor, and this is what this list is built to face. With Uncanny Luck, he's one of the better white save hero units, as he gets to reroll saves. So now we've settled on Lando, let's give him Underworld Connections. This gives me the flexibility to order Mando if I want to, but it also lets me give Mando an order with Lando's 2-pip Ace up his sleeves. This card lives in my contingencies, as it doesn't have to be in your hand to play it. The card reads, before drawing from your order pool, you may instead discard this card from your hand or contingencies. Issue an order to Lando or a friendly unit at range 1 to 2 of him and activate that unit. This is great with Mando, as I can activate him whenever I want on any turn once per game, while still getting the independent aim and dodge. And then finally, I'm going to add prepared supplies to Lando so that I can have a dodge whenever I want. To round out this list, we could look at using the 146 points left to add another hero and get to 9 acts, or we could look at adding a bus or a T-47. With the meta around armoured gun lines, I think we're probably best off adding 3 squads of rebel snipers in. Range 5 high velocity Pierce is an incredible counter to red saves, especially a clone list when typically they spend good points to have token generation through something like Exemplar with Padme, Anakin or Yoda, so denying their dodges is really strong. The Rebel Strike team also have low profile, so they get the rare opportunity to have cover 3, as well as having Sharpshooter to reduce the opponent's cover. With Scout 2 they can naturally get into a good position turn 0, and with Surge to hit they're a little bit more reliable than their Imperial counterpart. Snipers are by no means an auto-include like they were in the past, and the new rules of cover have left them a little bit weaker than they were before, but we're going to add them in the list anyway. So the list that we have leaves us with a 2-point bid, and a pretty reliable gun line through critical, Din's Ambam, range 5 high velocity snipers and fire support on the Mark II. So the next thing we need to do is add in some command cards. The way that I'm going to do this, as we have contingencies 3, is add all 3 of Lando's cards to contingencies. The reason that I'm going to do this is to use contingencies you have to play a card and then swap with a card in the contingencies. The main reason that I'm adding Lando's command cards to contingencies is that while he is alive I have access to these cards. So if all of Lando's command cards are in my main hand and he dies, I lose access to the other command cards in my contingencies. So then I'm going to add all 3 of Mando's cards to my command hand. His cards are all pretty good, and I still have some options to swap them out for Lando's cards if I want. For the last 3 cards, this comes down to the generic options, and if I want the ones that give a card effect or not. So this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Starting with the 3-pip, I have access to Discretion, the Mercenary 3-pip, Covering Fire and Assault. The Mercenary 3-pip lets me not give out orders in order to buff other units with dodge tokens. However, the card effect only applies to mercenary units, so it won't work very well for this list. Covering Fire gives out dodge to a friendly unit at range 1 to 2 of an attacking unit, so this card has the potential to buff my army. Or I can take Assault, and that just gives 3 units an order. So I'm going to add Covering Fire, as that turn I don't need to pop my HQ uplinks, and I can get into position that I need to be in. The 2-pip feels a lot easier. We've got Aggression, the 2-pip Merc card, but again, same issue as the 3. It'll only buff Mando. So that's out of this list. And then Turning the Tide, which works on supports or heavies, got none of them in my list, so I'm going to take Push, the generic 2-pip. And for 1-pips we have 3 options. Now this is where it gets a little bit more spicy, and we're going to consider the Mercenary 1-pip. Ploy lets you place a face down order token of your choice on your command card, and you can pull off of this whenever you like. This gives you the flexibility while still gaining independent dodge for Din, and it would let me activate him whenever I want. but it also lets me do it with any other unit. So I could give it to Special Forces, I could give it to Lando, it's totally up to me. The generic 1-pip, Sabotage Communication, reduces the number of orders your opponent can issue with a command card. And the final option is Ambush, with no effect. I'm going to go with Ploy as it gives me the most flexibility in my list. The final thing to do when list building, and arguably the most important thing to do, is to build your battle deck. So we need 4 objectives, deployments, and conditions. With this, I want to use objectives that I can play as a defensive gunline, and I want to avoid the ones where I have to move my army. So I'm going to avoid bombing run, breakthrough, and payload. And I think it's also worth avoiding hostage, as I've got no force push. So I'm going to start by adding intercept, as I can castle up around a point and work my way towards the middle point. Key positions, as it's good for this list, as it becomes as defensive as possible. And then I move late game. Hopefully I killed some of the opponent's units. Recover the supplies, as I have a speed 3, jump 2 Mando, who can move to the middle box. And finally, I'm going to add Sabotage. This one's a little bit controversial, as it becomes a tie and goes to kill points, but with bounty available, I'm hoping I should be able to claim a victory point if I play well. With deployments, I want to keep my opponent as far away as I can, so that I can make the most of the range that we've added throughout the list. So I'm going to add battle lines, advanced positions, long march, and major offensive. This should keep the enemy at arm's length and let me pick off some units at range. Finally, conditions. I'm going to go with clear, fortified positions, as rebels love extra barricades and access to heavy cover. Supply drop, as most of the time this works as clear conditions plus, as most people don't want to give their opponent any perks, so we'll veto this card. And finally, I'm going to add hostile environment. As I have a gun line, I'm going to want to be in cover, not moving very much, so I'll spend most of my time in contact with terrain, which helps me avoid the negative effect of this card. Being 11 activations, I have a strong gun line at range 4, I have bounty, and I have high velocity pierce. I'd be pretty happy to play this at a one-day tournament. There's plenty of other ways that this list could have been built though. I would love to hear how you would build it differently. I hope that this has helped show some of the decision process that I take when building a list, and I hope it helps with building yours. The advice that I would offer and hope you take away from this is to try not to fill all of your upgrade slots, as this often ends up with wasted upgrades, and choose a focus piece or a theme for the list and work around that. Until next time, may the force be with you.
That's no moon.